What's up YouTube? Today we are looking at Wider 2 from Polyverse, which is their brand new update to their really awesome free widening plugin. So I've discussed in a previous video why this plugin is actually so cool compared to other kind of stereo wideners, and I'm going to do a bit of a follow-up video kind of talking about the technology inside the plugin. But in this video I kind of just want to announce Wider 2's release and show you how damn awesome it sounds, particularly on bass, because this was somewhere where you kind of struggled to use Wider before. Anyway, without blabbering too much, let's dive in and have a look. So the big new feature in Wider 2 is the, I would say, multiband mode, but it's slightly different to multiband mode because it doesn't actually do any frequency splitting. So with traditional multiband mode, essentially you're creating a phase rotation because of the way that you split the frequencies into several bands. In the video, which I talked about how Wider works, I showed you guys that Wider works using a series of all-pass filters, which is the same effect as phase rotation. So essentially what the low bypass setting is doing is, rather than splitting the signal and then affecting the one signal different to the other, it's essentially allowing a frequency domain in which these all-pass filters exist. So like I said, I'm going to talk about the technology behind it in a future video, but one thing to just note is that it's much cleaner way of doing a kind of frequency split with this kind of widening than the traditional multiband mode. So it's not actually a multiband mode which they've added, it's just a low bypass. But again, like I said, I'm going to explain that a little bit more in detail in the follow-up video. I just want to show you how awesome this is, because previously it was very hard to use Wider in the context of a bass line, because what would happen is certain frequencies would be panned left to right. And so if you have frequencies in your bass line, below 100 hertz, then what would happen is those frequencies would kind of be balanced across the panning spectrum. So you'd have a stereo situation happening with your low end, which is not necessarily something that you want to do when you want to mix a clean low end of a track. You want your sub to be kind of monocentric. So this phenomenon actually becomes even worse when you have bass notes that change, because those frequencies would be panned differently. So you'd have this bass that kind of travels left to right, almost like a piano sound, as if you're sitting behind the piano. Does that make sense? Which is not necessarily something that you want. So in Wider 2, they've actually added the ability to bypass anything that's happening below a certain frequency range. So immediately off the bat, one thing that kind of it was a bit strange for me is that the setting is a rotary setting. However, there's a new settings menu over here, which allows you to not only change the GUI size, but you can also change the knob mode to linear. I personally prefer linear. If you personally prefer rotary, that's up to you. But I just like the added extra, which allows you to just go in there and change it to your specific needs. So I just find this is a bit easier for fine-tuning. Say, for example, you want to do the frequency split at exactly like 125 hertz. Then you can do that. So this is also fantastic on stuff like percussions, where you may just want to brighten up the top end, but you don't want too much phasey information happening in the low ends and that kind of thing. Then you can do very high splits. So let's just experiment a little bit with this on the bass line, get it sounding really good. Then we can look at it in some other contexts. In fact, let me show you what happens when we turn the low bypass off. So play this on the bass line. So this is off, and then I'll turn it on so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about the panning. So for this specific frequency, it kind of balances a little bit to the left. Depending on what the key of the bass would be, it would balance it in kind of differently. That's just how Wider works. So, being able to control at what frequency the plugin kicks in and starts working is really, really cool. Check this out. because the lower frequencies have longer wavelengths, you notice these kind of phasing issues a lot more, whereas in the mid-range and high range, you barely notice these differences in the left and right of those specific frequencies. Does that make sense? So it makes this plugin a little bit more transparent, but also makes it usable for contexts like bass lines. It just opens up the boundaries of what you can actually do with it. And on top of it, the fact that it's still a free plugin, it's fantastic. So originally Wider was kind of conceived as a widening plugin, but mainly developed for use on mono signals to create stereo on something that doesn't have it. Does that make sense? However, the ability to low bypass something, like I said, just widens the use case of the plugin because, for example here, listen how we've got this kind of phasey mid-range when we add it to our percussions, but we can fine-tune it so that we're just cutting out anything that's happening on the plugin below a specific frequency range and kind of cut out that phasiness. So we're still getting this wideness from the plugin, but we can kind of control where it is. You know what I mean? Okay, let's try it on some individual lead sounds. So here I've got like a loop which I've made with some grid sounds, and then another couple of other single hit sounds that I made in Phase Plant. So notice how with this one-shot synth, there is quite a lot of low end in the sound. So it's still getting that kind of same effect that I was talking about that we get with the bass line. So this would definitely need something like a low bypass. So now traditionally, I would end up just EQing it before the wider. And then what happens is you kind of just lose out on that frequency range. But it's okay because, I guess it's a trade-off. Music production is a lot about these different trade-offs. When you kind of boost the volume, you're trading off dynamics and that kind of thing. So it was just one of those trade-offs that I was kind of okay with. This, again, just boosts the use case of this plugin. Awesome. That is about it for today, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to be posting a link to where you can grab this plugin over at the Polyverse website down in the description below. This video wasn't sponsored in any way, but big thanks to Polyverse for just making awesome plugins. I did actually speak to one of the folks over at Polyverse, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit further in the follow-up video, which I'm going to get a little bit more technical. Anyway, stay tuned for that. I will see you guys next time. Cheers.